So this week, the judge overseeing Donald Trump's criminal fraud case in New York ordered the incoming president to be sentenced next Friday, January 10th, which, if you're doing the math, is just 10 days before he takes office. Now, in doing so, Judge Juan Merchan rejected Trump's combative last-ditch attempt to forego sentencing and dismiss the case altogether. Merchan said that presidential immunity does not extend to a president-elect who is not in office yet. But he also ruled out any sentence of incarceration. Instead, he suggested he will order an unconditional discharge. That is, Trump won't face jail or probation or any other punishment. And given the crime here, that would be pretty unusual under any other circumstance. In fact, the New York Times review of the 30 felony false records convictions in Manhattan since 2014 revealed that no other defendant received an unconditional discharge. They instead received jail and prison sentences, probation, conditional discharges, community service, or fines. Andrew Weissmann is the former general counsel at the FBI. Neal Katyal is the former acting U.S. Solicitor General. I think you know them both. I don't know why we have to keep introducing all of the things because you know them both, but here we are. Okay, Neal, let me start with you. I think, obviously, this was a strongly worded from Judge Merchan. But for anyone out there who's not a lawyer and who's wondering, what is the point of having a sentencing hearing but not punishing him at all? What is the point?
Yeah, so it's strongly worded, Jen, in two different senses. In one, the first part, Judge Merchan really says, look, Trump violated the law, had felony convictions. This jury, this guilty verdict wasn't handed down by operatives or elites or anything like that. It was a jury of 12 of Donald Trump's peers who listened, they deliberated, and affirmed the enduring principle that no one is above the law. So that's part one of the decision. The judge says, I'm not going to overturn this conviction. The jury rendered it in a fair and impartial way. Part two, about the sentencing, the judge says, but I'm likely to give what he calls an unconditional discharge, which, as you say, means no jail time. It's still important because it's still a felony conviction, and Donald Trump almost certainly is going to appeal it in any number of ways. But right now, Donald Trump stands as a convicted felon, and sometimes you do have felons who don't serve jail time. It's a really rare, as that New York Times study that you pointed out says, but it is possible.
All right, Andrew, I'm just trying to kind of help explain to all of our viewers here, no one better than you two. Is there anything the judge could have done differently to change where we are clearly arriving at on Friday, or not?
That is a great question because it gets at the dilemma that the judge had. Because the only other real choice, absent giving Donald Trump what he wanted, which is an outright dismissal of the case, and the judge rejected that. And as Neal said, the language, and as you point out, was very strong. He called the case here a premeditated and continued deception by the leader of the free world. Nothing about the sentencing takes that away. It's worth remembering, whether sentenced or not, that is what the jury found he did, and the judge has said that. But the only other option for the judge was to put off the sentencing until 4 years from now, after Donald Trump is no longer president. And at that point, even the district attorney's office said jail would not be appropriate. So this is a really unusual situation. So it's hard to compare it to the other 30 cases that the New York Times looked at, because you would have had this 4-year hiatus. And the final thing that's sort of important to notice, by sentencing Donald Trump this Friday, he actually will trigger Donald Trump's appellate rights, because if this was waiting for 4 years, the normal rules are that Donald Trump would have this hanging over his head for his entire presidency. So, in many ways, this was a really Solomonic decision. It gives finality to the district court's, the trial court's ruling here, and it sends a message about this case to the public.
There were a number of messages, at least in my reading, in how Judge Merchan wrote this. I mean, it was pretty scathing, as Andrew just mentioned. He also calls out Trump's lawyers, Todd Blanche and Emile Beau, for using language in their filings he says has no place in legal pleadings. I mean, these two, for anybody who's not following this, and I think many of you are about to have big jobs at the Department of Justice. So, Neal, let me start with you on this one. What does that tell you? I mean, the language they have in here, how they've approached this, about what we should be preparing for, that these two individuals who the judge went out of his way to kind of call out are about to have big Department of Justice jobs.
Yeah, I mean, it's a shot across the bow, not just for the lawyers, but I think more specifically for Donald Trump himself, who had made any number of public statements about the court, about the judge, about the process that I think the judge was worried about. The judge went so far as to actually quote Chief Justice John Roberts' statement just a few days ago on New Year's Eve about attacks on the judiciary, trying to destroy its credibility and undermine the safety and security of judges. So I think that's definitely part of it. The other thing, just to return to the earlier conversation, that I just want to make clear, the judge is not saying, oh, Donald Trump, you did something that wasn't that significant and therefore I'm not imposing jail time on you. Rather, he's saying that because a state can't jail a sitting president, that option was off the table. So if Donald Trump tries to say, look, I'm totally exonerated, the way he did to Andrew and others in the Mueller report, on the basis of this judge's decision, absolutely not. The judge is saying, just by dint of the Constitution, one state can't undo the whole, just like South Carolina in 1862 couldn't put Abraham Lincoln in jail and undermine the nation's will. So it's not about the crime, it's about the fact that Donald Trump was elected and is going to serve as our president.
We only have about 30 seconds here, but Andrew, you've poured over this. Anything we missed you think it's important for people to understand?
Well, I think your comment about the lawyering is important because it's hard to see how the new incoming administration at the Department of Justice is going to uphold the rule of law when one of the things that the judge found, and I'm just going to quote it, is that he said it's public record that the defendant has gone to great lengths to broadcast on social media and other forums his lack of respect for judges, juries, grand juries, and the justice system as a whole. So, that is what the justice system at the Department of Justice that Neil and I served in for, collectively decades. It's hard to see how you have that institutional concern when you have a president who has that record.